and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and we're going to be continuing with our sort of O2 advert tutorials. So in the previous one we did our torso, and we did a couple of little extra things with the head. So now in this one we will go through and just do the shoulder piece and try and get through that a little bit quicker so they're not doing really long lengthy tutorials. I just want to say thank you for watching. Hope you guys are enjoying this. I know that this modelling section's a little bit, it might take a little bit of time, but we want to try and get it as close as we can. So being a bit more precise does take a bit more time, and when you're following the reference. So don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help. And yeah, let's get going. So in our previous tutorial, we've created our head, our neck, and our torso. So now in this one, we're going to go through and we're going to create the shoulder part. We only have to do this once because the other side's going to be a duplicate, and that's kind of the same with the legs as well. So let's do the shoulder. And if we look at it, we can basically see it's kind of just like a sphere with some sort of weld rim there, similar to the neck. But we discovered that this bit actually rotates around, so this will have to be separate, which is fine. It makes it a bit easier. So I'm just going to go to my panels, orthographic front, bring back my reference. And I know this is kind of, we based our reference starting from our head because that's kind of seemed the straightest part. And you can sort of see it's kind of off here, but it's because it's been posed. So you can see it's like he's not perfectly stood up straight. So we have to try and get it relatively close, but it's not going to be absolute. So I'm just going to create a sphere. I'm going to pull this down in the y-axis and pull it over there to the left. I'm just going to scale this up. If I just go to my wireframe, it'll give me a better idea of the size. And I also want to sort of guesstimate this size. And I want to look at, whilst I'm placing this, I'm keeping an eye on what my body is and where the curve is going up and how far this is going out. I can look through different parts of ref, seeing it's very big, punchy sphere shape coming out of there. So we'll just keep it completely spherical, and it will help with the other bits as well. Cool. So let's see what this looks like in perspective. Because before I lined it up, let's hide that and turn our shading back on. I kind of feel that this pokes out a bit too far. Well, it kind of looks like it pokes out quite far there, but I feel that that's probably at least, you're only really seeing half of it. So you never see, so what I'm basically looking at now is when I'm looking at this bit here, it's quite hard to see on the sphere that this is, if you think of how a sphere works, it's completely round, right? I don't need to tell you that. But when we look how the placement of it here is, if we follow my cursor, it's still curving round, but it's not quite got to the sort of peak of the curve. So I imagine it probably still goes a bit higher. So, and when I've got it, as I've got it here, you can sort of see the curve of the sphere goes up and down. We don't have that sort of dip down in here. So I'm just going to pull that in pretty much until I get a nice space where, because I can see that this is still continuing to rise up. At no point that does this look like it's going to go down. So I feel it's probably quite close to that. And we got a pretty decent placement here. Cool. So quite happy with that. And if we look at our ref, possibly it's because it's posed, but we know in here that the bottom of it's kind of this is where you kind of have to use best judgment and use sort of as much of different types of ref as possible. You can see that there's a space between the top of this sort of badge thing or button thing between the bottom of this. So maybe even that is actually a little bit too big, and it only just goes up to the curve there. So it's really a lot of the time on these tutorials is literally just going backwards and forwards from reference. I know it can be a bit annoying, but when you're working in VFX, film, TV, games, this is going to be the time you spend analyzing on your reference will make such a huge amount of difference. Cool, so I'm quite happy with that placement and that size. So then obviously our next thing would be to get this sort of cut out bit here. So let's see if we can find any actual other. There we go. We can sort of see it goes across here. You can see you could almost say it's almost been like booleaned out or something, which we could do. We could sort of see the seam here. It almost just looks like they've it almost looks like they've just put a torus there. And just bent it round. It's a bit more obvious looking at this bit, but it's hard to tell. Cool. So if press 3 on that. And so we can use the similar methods that we used before. I'll always use so if I scale that P cube up, so I just created a cube. If I select my sphere, then my cube, then I just go to rigging, constrain, point, constrain, orient. So I know that's exactly in the same place. So I'm just going to scale this down. And what I'm kind of looking for is imagine if I was going to boolean this, so to get this sort of very similar shape. And we can see that the shape is it's got a fair bit of distance between there. So because we don't have, it's probably a little bit, it really is hard to tell. Let's not move it, let's just scale it down a little bit. And I'm just going through, looking at different pieces of reference to see if I can see those gaps, see how far it actually, I know this reference is probably not ideal. You probably find better stuff somewhere, but yeah, this is just stuff I quickly grabbed. Cool, and I actually think when you come down to here, you can see it as actually, it seems like there's more away from the bottom. So it actually seems like the cutout is, I guess it makes sense because of the shoulder angle. So it seems wider on the top and thinner on the bottom. Just by looking at this here. Well, it might not be. It's hard to tell. It really is quite difficult. It's not the best. Actually, looking at that again, I might be completely wrong. That might just be the shadow. Actually, I think it probably is an even amount. But yeah, let's just keep it even for now. I could be wrong, but it's up to you if you want to sort of, at the moment I'm trying to get it as close as possible to the actual thing. So cool. So we've got our sphere. Now we need to sort of create this shape, and this can be quite tricky because again we're doing multiple cuts on this sort of shape. So I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. If you could probably, I imagine a lot of this has probably been booleaned and retopoed, but we don't really want to do that because I don't feel that's ideal. We might be able to add some subdivisions to this if it's not been scaled funny. Let's turn our shading, wireframe shaded on. So I'm just gonna cool. So this is how I do a lot of stuff as well. So I do look because I want to keep this sort of hard edge, and I'm just going to use this as a reference, really. Nothing else. We're going to be building onto the sphere as well, so we can kind of keep our sort of workflow fairly simple, although we still need to keep it really clean. Don't need to do anything. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to select. Actually, what I will do is actually go to mesh, and I'll just smooth this twice, just so it keeps it round. So there's no difference between that. Cool. I'm just going to merge these together. Combine. Excuse me. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to undo that. Sorry, I'm making a mess again. Cool. Just smooth it like that, but keep that subdivision. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I need to, because I'm doing that. I need to. We probably don't need all those subdivisions, to be honest. We can just get rid of them. It's good to sort of see it as a guide, but we don't necessarily need them. We can just bevel this. And like, if you've got to a point where you can probably skip past all this, you don't have to watch all these modeling tutorials. Let's say this is all based off just in case you're new to it and you haven't done it before. So these are all based to cover all. These are all to cover all bases if you're a beginner or not. Cool. So I'm just beveling that. I'm just going to merge these two together. And this is going to be, so now when I press 3, it's all smooth and I can just use this as a template. And I haven't made such a high-res mesh here that it's difficult to create. So I will just make this live. And I go to quad draw. And like I say, you could probably like remesh this if you wanted to. I don't particularly want to do that. But all I'm going to do is just going to go through here. And start plotting out this shape. So we need to make sure if you're not gonna, because I try where I can, try not to use as much beveling where I don't have to. If I can create the shape. So like if I press 3, that's going to give me a sharp enough edge. I don't have to worry about beveling. I do have to keep an eye on my, because I'm effectively creating this sphere from a quad draw, and it's the same as before. I need to sort of make sure that my polys are reasonably spaced so it doesn't cause any sort of pinching. And I was going to match these, but then I kind of figured out it didn't really match so much with the corner that I wanted to do. But the best thing you can do is just experiment with this sort of stuff. It does seem to be climbing up there, which I don't want it to. Might actually have to, if I turn that live surface off, I think it's because it's following this edge here, so I probably will actually have to smooth it, and it's no big deal. You can go kind of crazy if you want, just to make it sure it's so that's why it's climbing on the geo. So yeah, that's nicely on that edge now. So when you're doing stuff like this, you do need to pay attention to seeing what's going on. Otherwise it can quickly go wrong. You probably could make this from a sphere quite easily. But this way it just means that I know that I'm not necessarily fixing geometry from like a Boolean or anything. I know I'm creating it correctly from the ground up. I'm just using this shape as a reference. And you probably could, like, if you're not even bothered about the whole sort of topology side of it, you could probably just throw this in ZBrush and just re-topo it and something like that, because it's a hard surfaced object. It's not, none of these parts are going to be deforming, so in reality the actual topology of it doesn't matter as much. This is more of a good practice sort of thing. And like I say, you might actually have better tools in Maya. You might not be following this in Maya. It could be in Max, Cinema 4D, or Blender. I know they've got some pretty good tools in there. Not everyone likes to model in Maya because it can be a bit manual. Well, it's manual if you... I think I'm probably end up making things more manual than they need to be, but and depending on like how much detail you went into your blocking. So if you block this in, you probably could just use your blocking model as a complete, just completely as your sort of live object. So I'm just going to tidy this all up and just make sure it's kind of nicely spaced. It's not the best, but it's close enough, I think, for what we need. Cool. And it's quite hard to see where the halfway mark is on it, but on this cube we can see the halfway mark here. So we don't necessarily have to do the whole thing, we can just mirror it over. So I'm just going to continue with... Oop. Making my geometry round. So I hope you guys have been enjoying this sort of like little series of how to make this little advert. I thought when I saw it was quite a good example of what we can do in a short space of time. Like, I think if you really committed to all the tutorials over the weekend, you could probably get this done in quite a short amount of time. But the amount of time taken it's not a huge thing. All that matters is you just take your time to do it, and doing it correctly more than doing it right rather than fast is absolutely better. So I'm just going to count how many I've got done there. So I've got 1 going across here, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4 to the middle. One. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Just evenly spread these out. Let's just try and keep it as clean as possible. A lot of this is very tiny tweaks, but it does help that we're kind of snapping to we know it's a round surface. Make sure you get those vertexes, not the edges. Keep selecting the edges for some reason. Sorry, I've got a bit of a tickly throat. Cool. So I'm just going to continue making this. Just try and keep it on that center line, and we can scale this the vertices to keep them straight anyway. So, like we did before, we can be quite meticulous with our placement, but don't forget we can relax the geo afterwards. So if I hold shift, it will relax out. But we'll do that. You want to do that when you've kind of done it all, so it does it. It averages across all of your geometry and doesn't just do it to the bits that you've already got. Try and keep this straight on that line. So what we probably will do is continue from the top still. How long? We're on 24 minutes. Cool. And probably what I'm going to do here is continue. I probably will just continue actually around for now. I don't know where I'll try and do things a little bit quicker on these like kind of repetitive steps. It's really important that we do keep the geo fairly, because we're making a sphere, effectively making it. We want to keep it as close to a sphere as possible. We don't want to be messing around too much with the actual. So on this bottom bit, we'll make a sort of a node or a 5-point vertex. Just so we can sort of break away from continuing this curve. Because now we can sort of make it a little bit cleaner. And you probably think I'm crazy doing effectively. This is like organic. I like to. It's kind of a mix of organic and hard surface modeling. It's really important to understand how you can like merge the two, work with the both sort of techniques, I find. Although it's not 100% necessary, I find. You could probably just do the same here. And that's looking a bit messy, but don't forget we can smooth it out. You can see how we kind of get our geometry is getting a little bit squeezed here. So I'm being a bit rougher with my placement because I know I can start to sort of smooth it out a bit. If you want to add too many, so I've kind of added another bridge here. So we might, hopefully this shouldn't cause, because we've got quite a lot of space here, we could end up causing some pinching, but we've also got to try and reduce this if we can. Always smooth it afterwards. And I know we're not, our uniformity's gone a bit crazy here, but we want to try and, all I'm trying to do right now is just close this hole nicely with the correct sort of edge flow. So I'm hoping that I have done, so I know it looks really nasty right now, but oh, no. Cool. So that's pretty much all I wanted to do, was just to make sure that it can close off. Then I can smooth this out so it starts to relax around the smoothed sphere. So the next thing I want to do is sort of space these out a bit nicer. And don't worry that you can't see it. You just have to stay confident that it's still on your make live object. So we've got quite a few. So that definitely could be better. So let's just keep trying to make them even. This might take a little bit of time, just going backwards and forwards and just trying to sort of smooth them out. Then I'm just going to relax them. And when you relax, it doesn't relax the border. So if you've got that nice, it should relax fairly well. And you need to work your way up when you're doing it. And you can come out of quad draw and try and use the sculpting tools, but you really want it staying to this smooth object. Otherwise you might end up making it lumpy. You can see that the polys are starting to even each other out. I don't really like how that one goes down here, so let's pull these down and see if we can spread some of these a bit nicer going round as a sphere would. So now you're probably all saying, oh, you probably could have done this a lot easier, just booleaning it out. Yeah, it can be. It can be quicker. You could spend an equal amount of time cleaning up a boolean than it is to sort of make it from the ground up right. So it's really, like I say, there are so many different ways. Like this is not. Don't go into this and think this is the way you have to do it. That there are a lot of ways you can there are a lot of methods to achieve the same goal. This is just how I do things. But the methodology and the sort of guidelines that I'm sticking to are pretty much what you'll need to adhere to, sort of thing. So although my methods might be different to other people, but the actual core, the core method is pretty much you do it very similar to this. Just you might have a better tool to do it. I'm just waffling on, but yeah. So all I need to do now is just add a bit more to this because we're just going to have this hide in here. And even though we're hiding it, we still need to continue with our decent geometry. And this seam will probably be hidden under this little joint, where it joins will be hidden under the actual. And I also forgot that this actually rotates as well, so we do actually have to do the whole thing. So what I will do is let's hide the torso. Completely forgot about the whole thing rotates, so sorry about that. So we still do have to do the back of it because it does rotate, but we can just take that from another sphere. We won't have to quad draw around it. We can just grab a sphere of similar topology. We do want to make sure this is sort of level just so it's easier. And don't worry about that, we'll smooth that out. Ooh. Cool, so we've done that. So now all I'm going to do is turn that off, turn that off as well. Just going to mesh, separate these for now. Then I'm just going to create another sphere. Ooh, center that pivot on there. So I'm going to select this, then my new sphere. Go to rigging, constraint, point, orient. Just so I know it's exactly the same position and orientation. Just going to scale this up. I'm just going to hide that for now. So I'm just going to, probably could just model around this, but I think we will have to, because obviously the topology is completely different. So let's undo that. Sorry if you're following along and you, so I'm just undoing all the way to there. I'm just going to put that back on live. Put that back on quad draw. So what we will have to do is actually continue with this. We could probably duplicate. In fact, yeah, let's do that. Probably just undo that. Just select our poly surface. Just delete the history and freeze transform and just center the pivot. I'm just going to scale it in the X minus. So oh no, I'm going to duplicate it first. Then -1. And we can sort of see what we're going to get here. And there's definitely a certain amount of overlap that we can delete, which is nice. So I'm just going to do that for now. I'm just going to hide that. And let's say we can probably delete that. Delete that. Then that needs to join to there. So just deleting bits of the topology that I know I can fit together. I think I do need that. Okay. No, actually should be all right. Cool. Before I delete that, I must have undid it by accident. Cool. So I know this might not make any sense, but at the moment I'm just kind of like deleting bits so I can match up my geometry of it. Then afterwards we will just, that goes to there, delete that. Cool. So let's merge these together. And I'm going to use my center combine as well. Merge the center. I'll do that on all of these bits so I just know that it's doing it properly. And deleted too much. Oops, so I'm just going to pull this out. Don't worry that it's kind of like a little bit messy at the moment. We'll smooth it out. Who knows, you might have just modeled it by now. Cool, so select those and just go bridge. Select all of these. Ooh, bridge again. G. I know it looks like a mess, don't worry about it for now. Cool. Yeah, I think we just deleted too many bits. Cool. So now we've got this. And obviously it's a mess. So let's bring back our... let's delete the history of that. Bring back our cube. And make this live again. Then we'll just go back to quad draw. I'm just going to hold shift and relax the whole thing. Cool. Ooh. I seem to have made some points here by accident. Why is the head there? Let's hide that. Just move these points over there. You can just delete them, but we'll just repurpose them. Cool. We want to make sure that this is nice and relaxed, because the relax will just make it as close to the sphere as possible. And the only reason we've kind of done this is because the shoulder bit probably moves. No other reason. And I've just looked how long, and we're on 40 minutes. I'm trying to make these quick, but it's actually impossible. Sorry if you've come here for a quick tutorial. I don't do quick tutorials, unfortunately. But yeah. You don't even have to watch, like, if you're good at modeling anyway, you probably don't have to watch all of these. So this is more of just, like, there are a lot of tutorials out there at the moment. Everyone's doing VFX tutorials. Yeah, but no one's doing the whole pipeline, the whole process. So in these tutorials, you are getting the entire process of doing a shot, and you probably understand what parts you enjoy and what parts you don't enjoy, and that's probably one of the key things in VFX, is that a lot of the time you think you enjoy something and you don't, and when you're doing it full time, you'll want to do something else. So if you get a good understanding of everything that goes on, you'll have a better starting point. Cool, so we don't need that anymore. Let's just move that out. And we will tidy up all this afterwards. It's just easier. At the moment, it's just easier to sort of pull it around and get the topology evenly spaced. And we'll worry about this edge afterwards. Because we can just, like I said, I tend to always scale it. If I've done something like this, I'll scale all these vertices and snap it to the cylinder, sphere, sorry. We'll probably never even see this part, but it's better to be safe than sorry. It's better to do it and know it's there instead of not doing it. Then you're animating, you're like, oh my god, I see a hole. So I'm just going to really quickly, and we probably could reduce a lot of this poly count, but I'm not too fussed about it. The thing is that I'm just focusing on is that obviously with a lesser poly count, it would be easier to sort of maintain that sort of spacing, but modeling takes time. To do really good models, it's not a quick process at all. So don't believe in speed runs or anything like that, because it's all just rubbish. So what I'm doing is just roughly spacing the distance between these, ignoring this because I can just smooth it. So I know the smooth doesn't affect the boundary. Whilst I'm in quad draw, that is. If you're using sculpting tools, it will. So I'm just going to get this roughly smoothed out. Figure out my spacings. We probably could have got most of this from the sphere. But I know that my topology is correct from the start. I'm not fixing bad geometry. That's why I just don't like doing it. I'd rather do it more. I'd do it the longer way and not have to clean up a mess than just do it right from the start. But everyone, like I say, that's just my method. Everyone has different ways of doing things. Effectively, there's no right or wrong way, but you do need to stay within sort of some decent guidelines of modelling. I've always been quite attentive to my edge flow and how clean it is. I know it's a robot, generally probably doesn't matter as much, but if you're doing an animated character, which is going to be deforming, it really does matter. So when you do your skinning of your rigs, it's deforming in the right amounts, in the right places. And also if you're showing your modelling real, you want to show your wireframe. Like, if you're doing modelling, you will have to show your wireframe. And if this is and this kind of shows that actually, like, you've gone into a lot of detail and been quite cautious about your edges and stuff like that. So it shows incredible attention to detail. So I'm just going to scale that so I know that's flat now. Just going to unhide this cube. I do make sure that's in the center. I'm going to select my not those vertices, whoops. Just going to hold V. Just snap it in the X to the center. So now I know that's right in the middle. So I'm going to make this live again. Quad draw. I'm just going to go and smooth it. I'm going to smooth it as much as I can until it barely moves. Cool, I think we've pretty much got it. It's looking nice. Everything's looking very uniform. So now let's turn it off. And the one thing that we do need to do also is select these vertices and scale them in the X to make sure that they're 100% flat as well. Extremely minimal amount of change there. And we'll do the same on this bit here. Cool. So I'm just going to press, I'm going to delete my history on that. Going to change my pivot point to the edge here. Wow, we're almost on an hour. Sorry about that. I'm going to Control D, minus it in the X. No, minus it in the Z, sorry. I'd say because there are lots of ways you can do this. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. And I did just realise I think it only rotates. I think it only rotates this way. It doesn't rotate that way. So probably just wasted a lot of time. Yeah. But it's there just in case. So let's go to mesh, combine. Let's isolate that. Let's just select all these sort of middle vertices, and we can go to mesh, merge, and they should be on top, but we can raise the threshold. And you want to raise it only a tiny bit, just to make sure. You want to check nothing. So if you press 3, you'll see if it's broken anything. And it all seems good. We've got our nice sharp edges there. We've just got these sort of funky bits here, so we can bring back our... Let's hide our torso again. Let's make that live. Let's quad draw and just relax that. So that's how we, if you, like, I've just realised that we probably don't need to do the back bit for this because it doesn't rotate in that direction. But you can delete it if you want. But if your robot, like, you might not be doing this robot, you might be doing something else. So it's there if you want to know how to sort of keep it clean. I'm just going around and I'm just relaxing as much as I can on the joins. Cool, so that's that done. Let's hide this cube. And yeah, we're pretty much, I know it says we've overcomplicated, but we've made it so it's not over, I don't think it's overcomplicated, it's just it's done correctly. It's a different sort of way of doing things, I guess. So we could add the inside to this, but we don't actually really want to, because then we're already adding a lot of extra UV space, which we don't need. So we can just Control E, and you can either use the arrows or use the sliders. Sometimes I prefer to use the arrows. Sometimes this will make a difference with the thickness, but let's see if we can sort of see how thick these things are. And they're quite, it's quite deep and quite rounded. You can sort of see how it's pinching here. We can try and extrude it, but then press Shift, right click, and transform component. Scale that down. No, that's even worse. Don't do that. So we'll just Control E. We can bring this down. And I think this is kind of rounded in here as well. Cool. So before we do anything, we'll fix these. So I'm just going to scale it, just so it's roughly the same as the top, just so I don't create any pinching or anything sort of non-uniform, because if we extrude onto that again, it effectively will just multiply that sort of... Oh no, we've accidentally merged. Two points. I'm just going to undo that if I can. There we go. Make sure you don't merge these. So be careful that you haven't merged that. And luckily I had enough undos. So I'm just going to select the middle and merge. And I'm going to do that again. Sorry about that. Let's hide the torso. Let's make live. Quad draw. I'm going to just smooth this out. So it's always good to keep an eye on all areas of your geometry, because things like that will creep up. And if you don't notice them, fix them before they get forgotten about, they can become quite big problems. That's why I tend to sometimes, I save a lot, so I can, if something's like, so I do have a lot of undos on it, but you might not have as many. So saving often is good. Cool. So I'm going to hide that again. Just go back to our edge. I'll delete the history off that as well. Just Control E. And that might be why it was not necessarily extruding uniformly, because it didn't have an equal amount around, so it might have been pinching in a bit more. Hard to tell really. But yeah, we'll go through and just do it again. Scale these up so that's roughly matching. Like, they're not as bad this time. I think on the previous bits, because it was missing that extra edge loop in here. And we'll just extrude that out again. On the inside, just so that covers that base. Cool. It kind of looks like it's a bit rounded. It's really hard to tell. But what we can do, we can just add a multi-cut in here. We should be able to hold shift and transform component on that. That'll kind of give us a little bit of a push there. We need to select these and scale them out again. Ooh. Otherwise we'll create pinches. So sometimes you probably could have just beveled the edges, but let's see how this looks. It's looking all right. It's it's a lot sharper in the corners, I think. So we might be able to, if we select our scale and go to component, you'll see on the component it's now allowing us to scale and create it a bit wider. So we should be able to select all of these and do them, instead of doing one by one, you should be able to select them all and do them uniformly, because we're currently controlling it per component. So if we press 3, scale it out. If we press 2, actually, we can see what we're doing. So it gives us our sort of a softer angle. I think that should be all right. It's just a little bit smoother. And it's possible that that is a little bit. Let's transform that component and push that in a bit more. I actually will bevel this edge. Just slightly. I probably will just actually bevel that as well. Just so it's got some roundedness, but it's not too crazy. And you can see we've now got our shoulder insert. And that's taken quite a long time. We're on an hour. But we've got a clean shoulder geometry here now. Just delete all the history. Let's bring back our torso. Let's bring back our head. You can see it's all starting to come together. And now, hopefully, if we did put a... so we can unhide that. Luckily, we've still got that as reference. Let's mesh separate and center that. We can hide that bit now, we don't need it. We obviously don't want that because that's a super high poly. We can select this one, go rigging. You can set these up on your own shelves if you want. I've got used to switching through it so much, it doesn't bother me so much. So I'm going to hide that. And now, if we smooth this, we should have a nice even insert for, there is a little gap. But yeah, so that's how our arm's going to work. Cool, so yeah, it's been a really long tutorial again, sorry about that, but yeah, if you've enjoyed this, we'll carry on with the arm in the next one. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Yeah, it really does help, and thank you for watching.